Hi, everybody. This is John Bell, and this is the Harbinger Report. And I brought back my guest, almost become a co-host now, Shawn Starry. And the episode of this, as you see again, is about the zombie apocalypse, all right, which is very similar to the last show. We've been covering this topic for a little while now. I think it deserves to be treated, with more information kind of thing. I was able to find another source from my military contacts, who was also a contractor. I know a few, and when Shawn came on the channel and gave his story about this zombie fungal virus, if you will, I started reaching out to other sources. From I've got friends that are still in intelligence and contracting and military, et cetera, et cetera. I reached out to a bunch of them to see if they couldn't confirm. In intelligence, you always try to, just like news sources, like when we used to have this thing called journalists who actually did journalism instead of just reading off a teleprompter like actors today, giving you one-sided news. In intelligence, you want to try to find multiple sources to back up what you're claiming or what your intelligence information is. So that's what I was attempting to do. I was trying to find other sources. I did find a fantastic video. Unfortunately, I cannot put that video on here because it involves a connection between the zombie virus and things that we're not allowed to talk about on this show. You know what I'm saying? So Shawn and I are in talks about maybe working on another platform where I can share more sensitive information that won't be censored as much. And I would love then to go into that subject, show that video, and talk about why people are absolutely mentally insane if they ever, take this. So that said, getting into it today, I did find a source who got back to me, and they said, John, they're like, you're blowing my mind right now. They're like, they had to sign NDAs saying that they will not talk about this stuff. In fact, this is what the source said to me. He says, John, they said that if we ever talked about this stuff, that we would be sent to Guantanamo Bay or Gitmo. That's the way we'd be treated. No Leavenworth, which is the regular place where military goes to jail if you do something, usually heinously wrong. But that said, he says, no, we would go to one of these basically terrorist sites like Guantanamo or Gitmo or Guantanamo Bay. He said they wanted to impress this on us so much that they had us serve 6-month tours at each of those two facilities to say, if you talk about any of this stuff, this is where you're going to wind up serving as the inmate. All right. And by the way, that means no constitutional rights, no speedy trial, no lawyer, no presenting evidence, no getting an attorney, no contacting your family. You were just gone. So, and believe me, there have been patriots that have suffered under this for trying to get public things to the sources. I guarantee you. There was one woman that was a former federal agent that was involved in looking for weapons of mass destruction during the Saddam time, and she came out public against the official statements, and uh, she was abducted and taken to one of these facilities. Now, her family fought hard, and got like big level congressmen and stuff like that involved, and they were able to get her released after like 10 years or something like that in prison. Now that's unheard of. That's unheard of. But they eventually were able to get her out, and she went public with the story, which is why I'm presenting it right now. Anyway, that said, so my buddy said, I can't believe that there's someone out there that's talking about this. And I said, well, his NDA expired, so he feels comfortable going public with it, and it's such an important information. So my buddy, my contact, gave me a lot more information off of what Shawn had already said on our show. So I'm going to go over some of that. I took notes on it. I'll pull up my notes and just go down the list and make sure I cover it all. But most importantly, he said two things. He says, number one, he says everything Shawn said is correct. He said there is, in fact, a very real zombie fungus. All right, it's not a virus, it's a fungus. Often called virus, but it's actually a fungus. He says it is coming up from under the ground with these creatures that are more and more rising to the surface, like giants and cryptids and things like that are coming from underground. And he gave a little bit different detail than what Shawn said, but went into more detail in certain aspects of it. But he did clarify that that is absolutely true. He also said he was actually involved in teams that dealt with zombie outbreaks. And he gave examples of two of those that I'll share when I get to the notes. So that was one thing. Another thing he said was the video that Shawn said that he released to the public, that it's a lot of controversy because, everyone's like, oh, that's from video games. It's from a video game company, blah, blah, blah. He said, no, that's not the case. He said, my source said his own people he specifically said in the Ukraine, he had people that he worked with that were there, and they released that video to him, the same video, and said it was 100% real, and it went down exactly like Shawn said it did. He said that, and he said it was years ago. He didn't give me an exact time frame on when it happened, but he said that it was a U.S. bioweapons lab in the Ukraine that this thing had released from, whether intentionally or unintentionally. And they sent Russian Spetsnaz. And for those that don't know, kind of some military nomenclature, that is Spetsnaz or Russian Special Forces. Yep. They're like the equivalent of our Green Berets or Navy SEALs. And I can tell you this, in the SF community, they have a very high reputation of being badasses. All right, I can tell you that. My uncle was in I believe he served in a Ranger, but he just passed away. But I believe back in the day, he served in a Ranger battalion, and he was awarded an honor to go serve with the British SAS, which is considered one of the top of the echelon in the Special Forces community. And he said that they trained specifically for against like Spetsnaz soldiers. That was considered to be like their biggest opposition kind of thing. But that's also how, Shawn, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Your video froze up.
Can you hear me, Shawn?
Yeah, I can see you now.
Yeah, that was up for a minute. I just want to make sure the audio. Oh, well, sorry, I'm in a fight with my internet service provider right now. I was that's part of the reason I was late on the shows, because I was trying to do the show at 3:00. So, but they were giving me a hard time about my service, and it was supposed to be at high speed, and it's not right now. So I apologize for that. But anyway, so let me make sure I got stuff plugged in. So getting back to where I was, so he said it was Russian Spetsnaz soldiers that were sent in to investigate the situation that had gone down in the Ukraine. And I will say, as before, Putin has gone public saying that one of his biggest concerns about the Ukraine is he wants to eliminate the U.S. bioweapons labs that are there because he's afraid they can use bioweapons against the Russian people. And if there's any credibility to this story, yeah, I mean, I'm surprised that he hasn't acted more aggressively in that area. You know, where our government is saying, "Hey, give us all your money. We'll even borrow money against China so we can fund this whole proxy war against Russia and the Ukraine." That is wrong. Not to mention the real Nazis that are serving in the Ukrainian military there. Bad. All right. Um, hey, we would be mad at Russia if they were using Texas or even Cuba to attack the U.S. So it's no different when it's in reverse. They have a right to defend their country and their borders, um, and especially when this isn't a legitimate war. Man, Zelensky's a puppet that the U.S. put in place. That's all he is. He does whatever we tell him, and we're funding the entire war. And news came out too that Zelensky has papers to defect to the U.S. when things get too bad. Imagine that. He bought land in Florida, housing. Imagine that, and bought 2 mega yachts at the cost of hundreds of millions of dollars for all this stuff. I mean, it's a lot, and yet that's your money. That's your money. And I can tell you this, it doesn't take a rocket scientist or an economist. I got to get off my tangent. It doesn't take a rocket scientist or economist to see that the way our government is spending money and writing blank checks with zero care for repercussions shows you that they know with Brexit and everything else, our economy is about to crash. And we're going to go into super inflation, and then it's all over with. They want to do that on purpose. I believe, my personal theory, as well as others, that they're wanting to bring in a cashless society, a digital currency, which, by the way, Bill Gates has spoken of on many occasions. So has Carl Schwab of the World Economic Forum. So has many other nefarious individuals. Biden's spoken on it. The Federal Reserve spoken on it. So it seems like they're moving us into that cashless society. The problem with that is, then unlike money that we have now, every single transaction you do will be observed, recorded, tracked, and you'll be questioned on. All right. And it's so easy with that to bring in the social credit score that China's using, which is also all our leaders are talking about. Pay attention. So that if you do anything wrong, if you're not a good little new globalist citizen, don't talk the right way, or you offend them, then you lose points on your social credit score. You know what I mean? Then you can't get jobs, you can't work, you get docked money out of your account. I mean, we're talking about nightmare scenarios here. I mean, just look at China. China, it's like, dude, if you do something that they consider bad, they post like billboards of your face with your name, and everybody, your friends, your family, all shun you because they don't want to get their accounts credited because you dared to do something that the system said wasn't right. I mean, this is complete slavery and control. Nothing could be more anti-American, So, so these are some major issues and concerns to think about. Also, before I get into too much more so I just wanted to make those 2 points with my source about backing up what Shawn said, that this is real and legit. And he freaked out that someone was talking about it publicly. And of all the times I've talked to the source before, they've never mentioned this ever. And I've tried to get information out of them and wouldn't talk about it, just would not talk about it until I brought this up. And then all of a sudden just went off on it. So, and then the second thing about the video, giving a confirmation that they also were given the video. They did not release it to the public, but they did see it, and they were told about the information as a real situation that went down. So that's the 2 points I wanted to make. Second to that, real quick, I want to get into just some of the news that's going on right now. In case people did not know, First Ebola vaccines injected into patients in Colorado. So Colorado is injecting vaccines, COVID vaccines. I'm not COVID. I take that back. They're Ebola vaccines. It's a brand new thing. It's a brand new thing. Okay. It's another article on that. First Ebola vaccine injections into patients in Colorado. Okay. So you can look up, just use that headline if you want to look up more on that. And I highly suggest you do. Now, something else to that. Watch Bill Gates funding Ebola vaccine trial in the U.S. that sheds live virus 30% of the time. Okay, this is important. People don't understand. There's a thing called contact shedding or sloughing. All right, contact shedding or sloughing means if people take these, they then become infectious to other people around them. And it was designed that way on purpose. Okay. It was designed to spread that way. So one person could spread it to others. Well, this new thing they're talking about with Bill Gates funding Ebola, a trial, they're saying that they're finding it's shedding, it's spreading to other people, and they're saying 30% of the time. Now, when they say 30% of the time, don't ever trust those numbers. I mean, they try to skew that as much as possible. All right. If it's shedding, it's shedding. That's all we need to know. All right. Now, Ebola V that sheds onto infects others 31% of the time, given to Colorado healthcare workers just down the road from the new Ebola lab. All right. This one goes into more on that story, and I've got it referenced at the bottom if you want to try and look that up later. Here it says the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, FDA, package insert. Now they're starting to call this thing ERVEBO. All right, states that it sheds to others, and they said 31.7% of the time, for up to 20 days after being given the jab. That means that jabbed individuals can spread the disease to those around them. That's the key takeaway. That's what sloughing is. That's what contact shedding is. They can spread it once they've gotten it, especially after the first month of having it. And here's just another part of the article. Again, it's referenced at the bottom. You can look that up if you want to. So I wanted to show that. And leaving it there just a second so people can see. All right. So we'll get into it. So, Shawn, thanks for coming back. Just in case there's any new listeners, can you give a brief bio on yourself, your background, and then go into what we're talking about for people that might not have heard this, and we'll just do a small recap on the zombie fungal virus.
So I worked as a United States Marine Corps counterintelligence officer. I also have some training with NBCs, and part of my job overseas at the time was looking for nuclear, biological, chemical weapons to the back door, as opposed to the conventional. We had the UN inspectors that come through the front door. We would go through the back door looking for these things. And then I spent the last 24 years as a military contractor, and I've worked in several high-profile areas or high-profile federal buildings. And some of them that I've worked in are deep underground military bases, or the acronym is DUMBs. There are 2,200 DUMBs throughout the world that is U.S. owned. There's 1,600 of them anyway in the U.S. They're all interconnected with each other through a maglev train, where we can transport people and goods and services. But in one of the dumps that I've worked in at the 21st level, that's where the bioweapons labs are. So when I worked as, head of security down there, my job was to know exactly what it is that they're working with. You have an idea. We have a standard operating procedure as to how to deal with these things, these contaminants that they get loose. So I know firsthand that all these things are there. And again, just like John said, my NDA has expired. So I really felt that it was, since no one wants to be brave enough to talk about this, come out and talk about it. I figured, I choose to be on the right side of history. So it was important for me to be able to legitimately come out and talk to someone about this. And that's when I met John Bell. And I want to thank him for this opportunity.
Oh, fantastic. So, yeah, if you would talk a little more about what your experience was when you first learned about this, and when you were working in the deep underground military bases, the DUMBs. What? How did they explain this to you? What was your reaction? I mean, coming across this kind of information for the first time. I mean, I would have been like,
Well, yeah, the first time they started explaining to me what they what type of viruses and things that they had down there, they said it pretty much everything that they had was pretty contagious. It's super highly contagious. They and their thing was that they kind of tried to explain things away. They said that the reason why, well, I'd asked them, I said, well, why are you keeping these kind of viruses or funguses and all this stuff? Why do you keep it at the lowest level, which you're in the biolab? But why are you guys in possession of this, to begin with? And what's the reason behind this? And they said, well, it's because they had been working on creating vaccines for each and every one of them. And so we got to talk, and and I knew a little bit about vaccines. I know the history of vaccines. I know how with the polio, and and how the founding father of vaccines, how he had failed in his first attempts with the vaccines because he had dead cells within the injections. Although I do know or remember from reading his works, he talked about how he felt that it was successful because the body could be able to recognize what this foreign entity is, and then the immune system would naturally build itself up around that and kind of learn, kind of like a computer, collecting that data, right? But the problem is that somewhere along the way, they took his formulation, and instead of putting dead cells into vaccines, they were replacing it with live cells. And the problem with live cells is they can replicate themselves inside of a host. And so when I was talking to the scientist about this, and he said, basically, that's true. Yes. He said, anytime you have a live virus, a live fungus, or a live bacteria that you put into a vial, that's going to be your vaccine shots. And, they can only put so much in. It has to be so many parts per billion. And so when they draw that out, they draw out to a certain length of that needle. So it's in the millimeters. And then it all depends on your body mass index. So your height, your weight, and they formulate that. But the thing is that what scared me behind all of this was the fact that they're putting live viruses in it. Now they're injecting that into people. So basically, these people are walking biolabs, freely walking out and about, their homes with their families. They're going to work. They're anybody they come within close proximity of. They're shedding this. I was told that majority of the viruses, anyway, or everything that they got down there for the vaccines. The interesting thing is that the shedding is 21 days. Okay, and I was told every time you get one of those shots, it's 21 days. The thing is that the production to create these vaccines, it doesn't take long. Just for, I think he said about 2.2 million people, it takes about 6 months for production. So you could essentially have a 10% of the country in the United States within a year. So based on his, listening to what he's telling me in the formulation of the math on this, we have 337 million Americans. So it would take approximately, I think, about 10 years to mass produce enough insulin, or excuse me, enough vaccines for everybody in America to get these vaccines. But one of the interesting things I found out about a lot of these vaccines is that when they do trial tests, they always start out with, your white albino mice. They do the white albino rabbits, and then they do the rhesus monkeys. Now, they have to look at the adverse reactions on this, and they have to list everything before they can even move to human trials. And in order to go to human trials, they actually have to go to Congress and get an actual approval to be able to start human trials. Now, what I've learned when I was down there is that they found a way to bypass that. So now, especially in the last 10 years or so, one of the things I found out was that Obama had actually lifted that requirement to one of his executive orders. So pharmaceutical companies can start, they can use humans as a testing grounds, and it's protected under an executive order. Now, do we know where it's coming from? Typically, yes. They have to give us what they call the informed consent. It means they have to tell us that they're doing this, right? And then one way of doing that is like we saw with the pandemic. People were flocking to get their vaccine shots, right? Not knowing what the adverse reactions were. I was actually tasked to go and work with an Illinois National Guard in Rockford, Illinois, at the old Kmart building on the south side of the city. And there was other military contractors there. Their job was primarily to take the dead bodies and take them to the crematory. There's no autopsies. They just take them right there. My job was to provide hands-on security with family members or people who were rowdy or anybody that's going to be difficult, or protesters or reporters or whatever. And 30 days that we were doing this, we saw 30 people died from this. We saw over 90 people injured. But in the last couple of days,
what specifically were they dying from?
They were dying from the COVID vaccines.
Oh yeah, well, we can't say that.
Oh, sorry.
It was from that situation that people you were having problems from.
Yeah. So I went to the the officer that was in charge with the Illinois National Guard, and I said, "Hey, we're just curious, want to see what the adverse reaction forms are. They're little packages that are within the boxes. That's the only way we can open it up and take a look at it, because this doesn't feel right. There's so many people that are having some serious reactions to this." And so we took it back into the break room area and we opened it up. It's about the length of your bedroom door and about the width of it. And there's only one print on the entire thing. At the very top, it says "Made in China" by Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, or Moderna. But the rest of it's completely blank. And that's when it dawned on us right then and there that folks were being coerced through fear to come in and get these shots, but there's no disclosure for them saying that they're guinea pigs, right? Because the normal way of doing things is they put something out in the newspaper that say, "Hey, we're doing product testing. We'll pay you $1,500. You come in and take the product, and then, when you kind of you stay in contact with them, and if there's any reactions to the product, then they document everything, right?" And so That's the normal way they used to do things, but
Right.
that's all changed. So we took a step back. We both said, "Hey, there's no way in hell that we're going to take this, thing." Um, but when I was working in the dumps, they were talking about uh, that there were going to be a lot of outbreaks in the future. They talked about how they were working on vaccines and trying to produce these things, and that's the main reason why they have the deep underground military structures, is because they're planning on housing healthy people, uh, a restart of humanity, if you will. But it's also a continuity of government. So, in the place that I was working at, the starting numbers that they need to be able to make it functional is about 1,500 people. When I left, there's about 200 or 300 people working there. So they're not actually using every single level, but in order to make it completely functional with the numbers that they need to get started is about 1,500, and that can grow up to somewhere around 30 or 40,000 people. And so they've got enough supplies and everything they need down there for the next 600 years. So that's without a doubt.
So what are they preparing for? Here's something I'll say about Russia. They build underground bases too, but they build underground bases for all their people and citizens. Here,
Yeah.
they're like, screw all the people and citizens. We're just going to use their money to build our own structures and save our own butts. That's pretty.
Yeah.
Say what you want, but that's
They've
pretty
got
sad.
they've got a pre-selected list of people, and I want to say 99.9% of the people that are on the pre-selected list have no idea they're on the pre-selected list, and that changes from month to month. But the reason why they do that is because they're going to want people to help with the rebuilding of or the continuity of a human life, which is going to be underground for extended period of time. So they're going to need your doctors, nurses, scientists, your mechanics, people who can drive forklifts, people of high value. So them and their families, and so they're not just going to take anybody, like Russia's set up. They will have most of their people going into these bunkers. So not ours. Ours is going to be pre-selective. And of course, down there is no democracy. There is no due process. There's no constitution in those deep underground military bases.
It's martial law.
Yeah, it's all military run. It's got a military code of conduct, but it's also something else too, because it's more like that 15-minute city setup, because there's approximately 1 million cameras on every single level. So there's really nowhere that you can go that where you have absolute privacy, not even in your quarters or your little house or flat or whatever you want to call it. There's cameras all over in there. You can't cover them up, and you know what I'm saying? So they monitor everything. There's always somebody monitoring somebody,
Guys in my unit said that in SF circles that they were getting reports that there were SF guys that worked in some of these underground bases, and some of the things they said were that everything, all the vehicles, all the tools, everything down there was, number one, electric. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, you never had to plug it in. You never had to recharge it.
No.
It just ran endlessly. Like, you have power tools that you never replace the battery. They have vehicles that they never need to be plugged in, like our electric cars up here. So they said that blew their minds. You're talking even heavy tractors and heavy equipment that ran on electricity, yet you never plugged it in, never put a battery in it. And then another thing they said was the lights were strange too, because you would have light everywhere, but you would have no shadows, and you couldn't see where the light sources were coming from.
Yeah, that's called blue. That's the blue light technology.
Okay.
And that blue lights don't more saturated blue lights, they don't cast a shadow. I don't know the reason. Yeah, I think part of the reasoning has to do with the electrochemical in the brain,
Mm.
so that typically when you're walking under a normal light, you see shadows and whatnot. Um, After a certain time of the day, you start to feel tired or maybe distracted or whatever. But the blue light is it's more of it gives you that adrenaline boost, I guess, from what I understand. But I do know what it is that they're using as far as their energy source for those vehicles and the power supplies. It's actually called euphonium. It's the euphonium material. Um,
How do you pronounce that?
UMBOINUM, euphonium. And it's actually on, and this surprisingly, I think it was about 8 years ago, it showed up on the table of elements. And I've never seen it before on the table of elements. There's a whole new bracket
Yeah,
underneath.
including one that like the unobtainium or whatever that I claim vindicates Bob Lazar, because
Yep.
Bob Lazar talked about element 115 when he worked at S4 southwest of Groom Lake of Area 51.
Yep.
And when they tried to discredit him, even removing all of his educational credentials and everything else, um, everything that he said has been vindicated. He talked about element 115, he named it, and then 20 years later, our government comes out and says, "Oh, now we've got this new updated element chart, and one of them's 115," and gave it the same name he gave it 20 years prior. So, as
Right.
far as I'm concerned, that completely validated Bob Lazar and his entire story.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the thing is the reason why they had this all the attention drawn to Area 51 is because in Area 52, which is Groom Lake, that's where they're conducting a lot of their stuff. But they also have an actual underground city or a deep underground military base there. And that is one of the largest ones, besides the one in Nevada. But that's actually one also where they do all of their research and development for all of their energy, all the crafts, all of the UAPs. That's all ours. All of it is ours. So if you ever see a UAP up in the sky, just know it's ours.
I
Um,
uh, I was on Mount Tenerife with some friends of mine in college, and we decided that we were gonna, be a little naughty, and we wanted to spend the night on top of the mountain. Okay, and that's illegal. They have like rangers that patrol and stuff, so we were hidden off the beaten path, and we just wanted to spend the night out there. Well, I'll tell you, give you an example of how clear the skies were. Below our position was a observatory, like a star observatory for space. Okay, and we were higher than that. All right, and is my picture going off again? There we go. Yeah, so we saw a UFO. Both of us saw it, and at the same time, and I told my buddy, I said, okay, this means either A or B, and I said B presupposes A, and I said A, that's our technology you're seeing, even though it's breaking all the known laws of physics.
mhm.
That's our technology. So, but I said it's either alien technology or it's our technology. And well, actually, what I said was that's alien technology is A. And then I said B, or it's our technology, but B presupposes A. So if it is our technology, we got that from back engineering alien technology. That's it's way too advanced to what's out in the public. And we both saw it broke all the laws of physics, making, staggering turns. It go across the whole horizon and come to a dead stop, make a
Mhm.
90-degree turn at speed and come to another dead stop, things like this, right? So completely breaks all our laws of physics. It was obviously intelligently controlled. Nothing in nature moves that way. No comet, no
No.
meteor. They don't move that way. They don't break the laws of physics. So,
Well,
um,
that's the thing is our knowledge of the laws of physics has really been limited. So and I can tell you that all of this technology comes from the Watchers. Um, Not only during back in the biblical days of the Watchers, but the Watchers are still here. I mean, it's not like they're dead or anything. But all of that information has been in the control of the Orsini family, and the Orsini family's been They pick certain time periods, and in that time period, whoever is the emerging country that's going to be the one that's going to take all, the ones that's going to conquer the known world, they supply them that information to see what they can do with it. And then if they're successful, then they'll, continue to work with them and have control and influence over them. That's how they use it, and amongst other things. But the one in Germany, that was the one that everybody knows about, the Bellcraft, right? And so when the U.S. had, we were coming to the end of World War II.
The Glocker. The Nazi bell.
Right.
And it was a propulsion system based on the high-speed rotation of what's called red mercury.
Right.
And they found that when they spun this red mercury at a velocity, it's high speeds and also super cooled at the same time, it created a literal vortex that defies our laws of physics. It became basically weightless. And you could take even payloads and make it all weightless in this vortex. Also, in this vortetic field, you could also bypass the Newton's laws of gravity. So that's where you can make these basically high-speed turns without, having your brain come out your head, hitting a wall kind of thing. When you're going, at Mach 9.
The pilots that are in them, they're in this electromagnetic bubble that actually protects and shields them from, going this direction at 900 miles an hour, and all of a sudden you bank left and you're going straight left at another 900 miles an hour. It actually protects them from all of the, all the physics laws, right? So they're insulated in this magnetic bubble within the center or the middle of the ship. And that's why they can do what they do, which is pretty crazy. And I've actually seen our UAPs down in the dumps, so I know they're there, and I've seen them working on it, updating certain things.
Well, hold on that, because I'm going to do other shows just on the secret space program. So I'll bring you in to talk about some of the craft that you've witnessed when you were when you were a contractor in the DUMS and on some of the carriers and stuff like that. So we'll save that for that show. But let's get back to the zombies. So one thing I wanted to show is we had talked about this before, and this is one of the video clips from a congressman in Congress talking about some very strange events that Congress knows about that we do not. All right. Now, they say that this was in reference to terrorists, but listen carefully to the words. It's much more than terrorism, and the reaction terrorism, I promise you. So pay attention. And
Congress shall now vote for approval of H.R. 8791, the Homeland Terrorism Preparedness Bill. Said bill requests emergency response funding up to and including, this section is classified, dollars to prepare for a national level terrorist attack and or attack from classified. Funding for first responder personnel and vehicles would be doubled if said attack leads to more than 80% of national population being affected by classified. This funding shall commence in conjunction with the first attack on classified or the first large-scale outbreak of classified, dependent upon which comes first. Civilian and military units shall be trained in containment and combat of classified, including irradiated classified, with possibility of classified airborne, classified flesh-eating, classified, and or all of the above in such event as classified spewing, classified escape, are released or otherwise become uncontrollable. Air Force units may also be directed to combat said classified due to their enormous size and otherworldly strengths. Should event occur in urban areas, that's classified, far surpassing our darkest nightmares. Should casualties exceed classified, body disposal actions shall be halted and associated resources shall be reallocated to classified underground, classified protected birthing centers, A new Bill of Rights shall be drafted and approved by classified. Having now reviewed the bill, I ask you to please cast your votes.
All right, so if you listen closely to that, it's utterly terrifying, okay? So if 80% of the population are leading to is infected by this, okay? Large scale outbreak, all right? That's not just terrorism they're talking about. They're talking about a large scale outbreak. Training against this specific maneuvers, flesh eating, all right? Flesh eating. Now that could be, we do know there's flesh eating viruses. So it doesn't necessarily mean it's just talking about zombies, but it could be. Or it could be talking about Nephilim giants. They're also cannibalistic flesh eating. In fact, the word cannibal comes from the giants. It was the worshipers of Baal in the land of Cana Baals, all right? Because they took part in eating flesh of other humans and themselves. Okay, and what happens if these things escape, all right? Their otherworldly size and strength. That's not terrorism. Otherworldly size and strength, okay? Then he talks about, oh, this is what we're going to do if it breaks out in civilian areas. And then he's like, oh my God, and stops right there, right? And then he goes on and says that it's going to get so bad, it's nightmare scenario, and they're going to have to form a new Bill of Rights. That is huge. That is scary. That is some very, very scary stuff. And I would be willing to say that they've already planned for this. They've already established a new Bill of Rights, and it's already taken place in these DUMBs. That's going to be a continuity of government that Shawn is on here so graciously talking to us about. Another thing, too, that Shawn mentioned before is they started putting into jabs for across the board, not just talking one in particular, was they've moved from dead cells to what's called a live attenuated virus. A live attenuated virus. That means it's giving you a living culture of what it is they're inoculating you against. That's why the idea is they give you a small dose so that your body's immune system can then develop a defense against it. But that's why it's so common. You hear people say, well, I never got sick until I took like a cold thing or flu thing before. And then I got the flu. You know, that's why they're giving you a live attenuated virus. Yep. And the problem is with this live attenuated virus, there is going to be some degree of chefing or sloughing or contact shedding. That's why when a person exhibits symptoms of having a flu, they are communicable. They are contagious. All right. General rule of thumb that my parents were in the medical field. My stepfather was a Nobel Prize nominated virologist. All right. He just passed away not that long ago. My mom was famous in her field. My dad was famous in his field, all in the medical stuff. So I understand. I have a lot more understanding of this than many doctors. I'm not giving medical advice. I'm not a medical doctor, but you've got to be careful who you trust on things. And unfortunately, we have a lot of very good-hearted doctors in the medical system, but they just do what they're told, or they lose their license or their job. You know what I'm saying? So they might be well-intended, but just don't know any better. And most doctors have very little to no training in virology unless they specialize and go into it. And that brings me to something else Shawn said, and that is our physics people and mathematics. We are not taught the same mathematics and physics or medicine that is in our public and or in our universities.
Yep.
They have a whole nother level of math and physics and medicine that is way above what's standard procedure or understanding or taught in universities. Yep. But they hold that knowledge for themselves, not for us. Not for us. It's not for us. This is where they talk about you have to be a part of the initiated, okay? Which yep. means a cult. You got to be brought into the that's their system of control, is these secret societies. That's how they're able to weave themselves into everything and have cohesion and control amongst those systems. They infiltrate everything like a cancer. That's why John F. Kennedy said that's repugnant in a free and democratic society. Secret oaths, secret keeping, secret societies.
Yep.
And he was talking about that because that's what he was facing. And by the way, right after making that speech, oh, he was killed. Imagine that.
Yep.
Yeah, they're still here. He's gone. You do the math. So those are important things to think about and keep in mind when you think about this stuff. As I said before, knowledge is power. So if you want to control power, you must control knowledge. That's the key. So that's what they do. They're gatekeepers for knowledge. In fact, I'll throw one little teaser out here from another show I'm going to do with the Secret Space Program, and that is Ben Rich with Lockheed Skunk Works. I shouldn't say it this early. I should wait. I should hold off on it. But Ben Rich said that anything you've ever seen in a science fiction film, we're already 50 years beyond that technology.
Oh.
He said Star Wars, Star Trek, he said we're 50 years behind that technology right now here in the U.S. In these aerospace black budget programs. He says, but this technology is in the black budget programs, and he said it would take an act of God to bring that out to the public, meaning they hoard that knowledge for themselves, for the sake of power, for the sake of control. And that's what it is. And it doesn't matter if you're liberal, conservative, or what. You have these power elites, and they don't care about anybody else except themselves. You know, it's like when Aaron Russo interviewed Nick Rockefeller, and Nick Rockefeller told him all this was coming, told him 9/11 was coming before it happened. All right. And he released it to the public before it happened, that it was going to happen. All right. Because Nick Rockefeller told him. And he told him, he says, look, we're trying to create a 3-class society. The elites that can do whatever they want and tell you to F off, the police military enforcement class, and then the peasants, which is all of us, everybody else. And many people that think that they're on the elite side and serving the elites, no, that's not going to happen. It's a very small crowd, and you're not in it. All right, you're not in it. Many people think that they're going to get crumbs or bones from serving the dark side. All you're going to get is betrayal. All right. So anyway, I'll get off my tangent on that. Back to zombies. So let me get into, first of all, before I forget, this is Shawn's book. All right. The Survival's Bible. I bought it. It's that thick, and I recommend it. So if you can pick this up on Amazon, and it's a good read. And as you know, I started another channel called Raven Bushcraft, and it's going to be focusing on survival, prepping, and gear reviews. All right. By the way, I tried to upload a show on that yesterday, and because I had a pistol in it, they removed the show from online. So apparently, I've spoken to some people. There might be another way. I didn't break any guidelines, but apparently they're having a problem with kids doing lives and like committing suicide and on a live, which is horrific. But so there is possibly another way to upload it to where, because man, I showed a pistol. I did a pocket dump, and which is very common military prepping thing to do, and but there's thousands of shows on YouTube that have that. So I don't think I violated any of their rules or anything. But I do understand about that. If they're trying to prevent suicides and that kind of stuff. So I get that. So we want to follow the rules best we can. We do make honest mistakes. So here's another book of Shawn's. All right, The Ultimate Home Security. All right, so he uses his vast knowledge of experience and his experience that he had in giving. I don't know, was that on your end? That wasn't mine.
So this book is actually designed. This is the actual education that everybody needs to have. You can learn how to secure your home, just like I did when securing the underground dumps and government buildings. But this is tailored for your homes, and so it's got the actual recommendations of what equipment that you should have. And the interesting thing about this particular book is going to go into helping you understand how the criminals operate. So you're going to be 10 steps ahead of them every single time. The Survivor's Bible is a book that is a military survival manual for civilians. And so it's going to do a breakdown, starting with the bugging in, bugging out, how they go hand in hand. And then you're going to get into some of the other things where it's going to help you make better decisions, especially if you're a first-time prepper, or if you're getting into homesteading for the first time, or if you're just trying to plan for something and you don't know where to start. This is what we call a landing book, and you can branch out from this one to get more specific of other things, or maybe more elaborate, extrapolated other types of books. But this is the main one. So kind of put in the context, I have military manual stuff that's actually in this book. It's going to teach you about how to escape and evade, the gray man theory, which is kind of tied into that. It's going to teach you about surveillance, how to do that as well. It also gets into like bartering. What are the most best way to barter, and how to barter, and what items that you should have for bartering, especially if the currency fails, or if you don't want to be part of the digital currency system, you have your own community. It talks about different types of gardens, and it also has in there one of the things is the 8 stages to the rise and fall of every civilization, and it shows you specifically exactly how the Orsini family for thousands of years have controlled, and the way they control it through a 100-year cycle. But it's the 8 stages and what to look for, and you can actually use that as a thermometer in your society to see exactly where you're at, and kind of see the impending collapse coming. But it also kind of gives you some ideas about how to kind of steer that into a different direction. So but as far as we know, is that every civilization that ever existed has collapsed. But what makes the United States different is that we're coming up on a 150-year mark, and that's threatening the Orsini's family's plans, the Constitution. Like I always tell people, I said, a law is only as good as those who believe in it. So if you believe in the law and you support that law, then that law becomes effective. No matter how much, Congress or whatever government throws, how much money they throw at it, that doesn't matter. It matters is the large number of population. So, but we've also got the Bill of Rights and the Constitution in the book as well. So if we need to do a continuity of our government, of our way of life on the surface, if everything goes to shit, we can rebuild things, and we can use that as a model guide if we're going to reestablish a new government or new laws, and we can model right after that. So, but there's a lot of content in there that's meant to educate people on the scale. So, your chances of survival goes up. You start with your home. Everything starts at home, right at the kitchen dinner table. It's also got links that you can go to. We have 3 training videos where it actually teaches you a home security. The first one is we use a 3-method strategy, and no matter what field of security that you're in. The first one is prevention. Second one is deterring. Third one is defense. Now the defense side, this is where we get a real live action video. It's something I did with my wife and my daughter when we created this video. How to address somebody who is trying to break into your home, and what things you should already have in place. And one of the big things is, like, you get a fire. We were brought up with fire drills, tornado drills, earthquake drills, bomb drills, back in the 50s. And what they don't teach people is home invader drills. And so that's why we have the defense side. We actually have a home invader drill. We'll show you exactly how to respond to this. And then it gets into the more details about how to address a responding police officer that comes into your home You don't say anything other than, hey, take a look at this video. Let him watch it, and this is going to be the influence that's going to show either one of the two things, depending on where you live. If this was a self-defense situation, or if it turned from self-defense to murder. But so that's why you keep in mind having a home intruder drill video out there, is so that people can be educated on how to respond in the most effective way. And a lot of this information actually comes from the Israeli Mossad that I trained with for 3 weeks. And this is how they do it over in Israel, because they've had thousands of years of experience. So having a lot of people breaking into their homes and doing the horrible things to them. And so I've taken this information, extrapolated this information, and put it into like a little video production footage. And so this way people can have all of the knowledge that they want, and to be able to watch this and go, okay, all right, this is it. This is what I need to know. And you can fortify your home however you want. But it'll give you some ideas what you should do with your bushes, with your trees, how to have a clear line of sight, all those things.
Yeah. Also, I'm hearing a lot of new reports that there's sophisticated gangs coming across the borders that are actually using jamming technology to jam your cameras and home defense systems. So,
Yes.
do you have anything to say as far as that, or how to protect yourself from that?
So here's in the book, you'll see this. You want to stay away from high sophisticated technology. And the reason why is because they make that so you're focused on convenience. So what you need to do is get rid of the idea of convenience. And you want to go low tech. Low tech as possible, the better. One of a couple of things that we talk about, like for equipments in the book, is a linebacker door bar, which you can get on Amazon. I have 2 of them in my house. The other one is called a BDX window film. This is actually how companies out there that are actually producing windows, like bulletproof glass windows for your houses. And you can get this BDX film, you can put it on your window. You put a couple layers on the inside, a couple layers on the outside. That's pretty much going to assure that they're not going to be able to get through that window. Even a fire marshal, they did some training on that just to see how quickly they can get in with a lot of their equipment. And what they found was that it was very, very difficult just to get in with just one film on it. So the idea is that it turns your normal windows very much like the windshields of your car. So if there's any impact, it's just going to shatter, but it's going to hold the window in place. It takes an extreme amount of force to tear.
That's called security laminate.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've actually seen that studies on that and stuff. And yeah, like you said, you can take a baseball bat to it and it will shatter the glass, but it still holds all the glass together. So another neat thing about it is that you don't have dangerous glass going everywhere. If you come home and find your stuff, shattered, that's also, I think, helpful. But yeah, the security glass is a major thing. Also, you mentioned before, I think when we talked that, all these camera systems now are all wireless, but you mentioned use wire systems because that the blocks of jamming too as well, correct?
Yeah. So putting this in context, so I've spent about $70,000 purchasing every type of wireless camera, everything from Wi-Fi cameras to cellular cameras. I've taken them apart, and one of the big things I do is I look at the actual chip. I'm looking at the central processing unit chip, and I connect that. I have a little device that hooks up to it. I'll hook it up to my laptop, and what I'm looking is for these codes, these lines of codes, and I can actually see who was the primary, or the primary place that built these. But more importantly is that, do they have a backdoor access to those cameras? And what I found was so disturbing was that all Wi-Fi cameras, every single one of them, have a backdoor access to it. And they can be accessed by pretty much anybody, even a hacker who has the right kind of equipment can get into the backdoor system and actually access your cameras. And we saw this with Ring. With the Ring company, they openly came out and admitted that, they took the videos from people's cameras without getting permission from them, and using that for their advertising. And so they really haven't changed. The only thing they did was they did what they called informed consent to the ring customers. And so that's why my recommendations are a closed circuit television cameras, because you cannot hack into CCTV. The only time you can hack into CCTV is if you have that hooked to your hard line to your router. Now, if you do not have any internet hooked up to it, you're safe to go. But the thing is you're not going to be able to see. You're not going to have. They do provide apps if you want to hook up your internet line to it. I don't. The reason being is because most of the time I'm always at home. I work from home. But for those who don't work from home, you understand the cameras are only there to record. They're not there to save your life. They're there to record the events. That's it. Okay. They're going to catch things that you may not see with your normal eye, but they're going to catch things
like ghosts.
Give you a heads up ahead of time. So if something is happening outside of your house, and then you get an alert on your computer or upon you, like on mine, I've got a monitor screen on the wall, and it's got split up with the different cameras, but it'll ping up. It'll show like a little red bar, and that lets me know there's activity going on in this particular camera. And then I'll just click on that, and it kind of blows up, and I can actually see what's going on. So if I know there's imminent danger, someone wants to commit a home invasion, okay, because there's a difference between burglary and home invasion. Burglary is that they think that you're not home and they're breaking into your home to smash and grab stuff and get out as fast as they can without being seen and without being heard. Home invasions are a totally different thing. Home invasions, they don't care about your items. They only
Nope. You froze up.
And they, of course, they always go after the alpha males first. Then they go to the women. Then they go to the children. So in some cases, I've seen in a lot of reports that in the past that the burglars will go in thinking, okay, nobody's home, and it turns out somebody is home. Well, they don't want to be, they don't want that person to turn them into the police or, narc on them, so to speak. And so they go and attack that person. And so oftentimes when police do their investigations, they'll find stuff was taken, but there was an attack. So they know that what happened was they thought the person wasn't home or anybody was home, and they came in, and then all of a sudden there was somebody there. And so they tried to eliminate that person. So there's no witnesses, or just your occasional knock on the head and knock somebody out, and it causes, maybe temporary memory loss or whatever, but it allows them time to get away. But with home invasion, that's a whole different story. Their only intent is to come into the home, hurt you and your family, or even,
And they're planning to kill you 9 times out of 10 if they're at that point. So
yes.
You have to be at a situation where, first of all, you got to be very careful that, it's not your daughter coming home late at night. You know what I mean? Because that's happened. That's happened, and people have died from that. So the one thing is being able to identify the target, number one, especially in darkness and quiet and all that kind of stuff. But two, if people are coming in with bad intentions, they're coming in with bad intentions. And one thing we were taught, and I certainly don't advocate violence, but I do advocate defense, especially of your family and your children. And when I was in the State Police Academy, they taught us, if you're ever at a point where you have to use lethal force, you damn well better use lethal force and nothing below, because you're just going to get it hurt in the process. And here's another thing too, since we're on the topic, people get this thing called tunnel vision when you have an attacker or you're in a heightened situation of stress like this. Your body goes through physiological changes, and you tend to get tunnel vision. Your vision becomes very acute in the direct vision, but you tend to also lose your peripheral vision, and you tend to get all focused on the target. Well, we had to train because we were having officers that were getting hurt. You got to train afterwards to look for other threats that might be there that you might not be aware of, and you got to force your brain to do that because it's not a natural thing for the brain. You're focused on the one thing you see in front of you, but you've got to refocus on that, on that peripheral to see if there's other threats that
You got, and the big thing about that training is you got to learn how to breathe. Yeah. And what we were taught anyway was learn to have swimmer eyes. So your eyes are swimming back and forth as you're panning around. So because normally when you're in a high stress situation, your head is pretty much your head is you get this feeling like your head's locked into place. So when that happens, you get that feeling, start getting swimmer's eyes, start looking around, even if you're not moving your head. But once you start moving your eyes back and forth, your head starts to follow. So that's how we were trained how to overcome those things. But definitely, you're right. That's why it's important to have closed circuit television cameras. If you have a monitor screen in every room in your house, especially in your safe room, where you got to create a designated safe room where you want to make it so there's no way for them to get into it. But at the same time, you want to have an alternative exit route in case if they decide they're going to burn the house down with you in it because they can't get to you. You want to have the alternative exit route. And most of the time, I've seen this about 99% across the board. When there's a home invasion, there's always at least 4 or 5 people involved. And it's always usually 2 or 3 of them will have a gun. So that, and there's of course, throughout a lot of the security community, I see a lot of people debating on what type of guns should they have for home protection and different things like this. And from my experience anyway, I have always found that it depends on the level of knowledge the person has or training. And for people who don't have a whole lot of training, the best gun I found was a shotgun with the bird shots. That is usually enough. When you hit the first one, the rest of them are going to scatter and run. The chances are that if you don't hit the first one, it's directly, you're going to catch maybe 3 or 4. But for the more tactically trained people, it's usually a handgun or maybe even a rifle, a short barrel rifle or carbine. It kind of depends on what you're comfortable with, but understand it's very fluid and it's going to be very quick and it's going to be very extremely loud. So that's why I kind of told a lot of my guys that work with me, I said, we're going to do tier 1 trainings. Eventually we started going up to tier 2 trainings. And then I eventually went on to do tier 3 trainings, which is more, inclined for those who've been in the military or law enforcement only. And so because I was a military contractor, I was able to go take these classes, get my certification, bring that back, like get a bump in pay or whatever. But so when you're sweeping a house and you got to understand about the fatal funnels, it's all about timing. It's all about reaction force and how you use the multipliers, so those cameras are going to be huge because they're going to give you eyes where normally you can't see. So normally if you're trying to look around a corner where you've got that camera, you've got that monitor in your room, and you can actually see even, throughout the house, and you can see them. It's almost like having a mirror that's standing behind the enemy, and you can see that reflection of where they're at. Those monitor screens are gonna serve you greatly.
Yep. And backing up what Shawn just said as well, I've done CQB training as well, and he's right that the best weapon is the one that you're most proficient and comfortable with, number one. However, that said, overall the best I would recommend shotgun, hands down, every time shotgun. One thing you have to keep in mind though, it's got to be a short shotgun, because when you're in CQB, your movement of travel is extremely limited. So it's got to be short. And second to shotgun would be a short barreled carbine. And again, short barreled carbine. They've got the longer ones. I prefer the longer ones for being in the field, but because they've got more range on them. But in a CQB situation, that's the case. Now, there's some experts with a pistol that they can run that thing almost as good as what others can do with a carbine. It's impressive. But Those are
Right.
highly trained and skilled and talented people. I wouldn't recommend that for everyone. In fact, the general rule in the prepping world or military, whatever, is a pistol is only to get you to what's called a real gun, which is something that's not a pistol. All right, so it's a last ditch. It's not what you don't want to go into combat with a pistol. Put it that way. You want to go into combat with a combat tool. I'll tell you this: many guys in my unit said that they would be very happy going into a situation if it was relatively close distance with shotgun, even against people with ARs and all that kind of stuff. They just do massive damage, and the spread on those things is huge. So so I understand why they're saying that. So, and that certainly gets people's attention. I mean, in combat, like in infantry, you can run your AR all day long and people won't even move. But you take out that hog, the M60, and you start firing that, and everybody hits the dirt. I don't care who you are, because that joker is bad. That's the old Rambo gun in First Blood, right? And I can tell you, Joker weighs like 28 doggone pounds, and that's without the barrel changes, without the stand, and without the ammo. I know, because I've had to hump that thing, and it's not pleasant. But anyway, so it's similar with a shotgun. We used to have a saying here that one bar fight, one trooper. And that trooper would walk in there and he would rack that shotgun and everyone would hit the dirt. And that trooper would say, if there's anyone standing, by the time this thing racks, you're getting shot. Boom! The whole bar hit the ground. And that was our rule. One bar fight, one trooper. But anyway, so yeah, that's a lot of great information, especially we're going to do other shows on home security, especially on my other channel, Brave and Bushcraft. I'm going to do shows just on home security, and I'll definitely invite Shawn to come over on those because he's got a lot more experience than I do. I try to stay up to date on basics, but I'm not a tech guy, as I tell him. My technical proficiency pretty much ends with turning a flashlight on and off. That's about it. I'm okay with my phone, but that's it. So I'm not a technical person. I hope as the show grows over time, I can get like a legitimate full-time producer and tech person that can, do the stuff for me, and I can just focus on the content and the show. But anyway, getting back to the zombie thing, I want to go over the notes I've got from my source that I talked to after doing the show, the last show with Shawn. So again, I reached out to a bunch of people that I know that are friends of mine from my old unit, from intelligence, from military, from across the board, contacts I've made over time and stuff like that. And I reached out to them to see if anyone could provide me with any more information on the zombie fungus apocalypse, for lack of a better word. I kind of like that term. I'll go with that. That Shawn talked about by coming across this in these dumps. Okay. And one of them did get back to me and said that, first of all, I blew his mind that there's anyone even talking about this. They said that they had to sign NDAs on this, and I already covered that earlier, where they said that they actually had to serve terms at Gitmo and Guantanamo Bay for 6 months each, saying that they'd be sent there if they ever talked about this stuff. So he said he couldn't believe someone was out there putting this public because their NDA did not expire. And I've tried to push this person for information before, even to similar on this topic, and I didn't get anything. But once I told him that Shawn had come out with this information, then he was blown away, and he told me more information about it. Now, Shawn had said that when he was taught that when you deal with these things, you need to stay at least 10 feet away from them. And in the dumps, they had lines on the ground, painted lines that were barriers. You don't cross this distance. All right. My buddy said he was on actual teams. He claimed that dealt with these things in person because there were outbreaks. They said that we've had that come, and he even mentioned remember the face eater bath salts guy in Miami, right? He even mentioned that, and in that video we played in the last show, we had talked about that, the bath salts guy, this guy right here. Okay, Now he referenced this guy too, as they went down to Florida to deal with the situation. I don't know if this one was directly involved in that. He just mentioned this case, that this was BS, that this was a cover for an actual zombie outbreak that took place. Just like in that other video we had shown in the last one. And if anyone hasn't seen that, I encourage you to go check out the last video that Shawn and I did, episode 4. So anyway, my buddy said that, or my source said that they were instructed in the field when dealing with these things, they had to stay 20 feet away from these creatures.
I think the reason
Their
for that,
instructions were.
I think the reason for that is because they're in a non-containment situation, whereas where I was working is more of a containment situation. So we're like, we have the restriction of at least 10 feet, but the lines are marked on the ground. I think we were like 12, maybe 13, 14 feet away from it. But there were certain kind of rules, like you can't talk to it, you can't make a sound, no stimulus, right? So no visual stimulus, no audio stimulus, and definitely try not to. Well, when you're working there, you can't smell all ranky, right? We're also told we can't even wear deodorant, we can't wear perfumes, anything like this. So I take showers and stuff at home. I would use the same stuff they use for deer hunting, same kind of shampoo, whatever, for deer hunters, that eliminates that smell off your body. Same thing with my uniforms, my vests, everything, all washed in that type of stuff. So when we go down there and we have to deal with whatever these particular giants, we have to be, if we suspect that we have a little bit of odor, then we have to put on suits, special suits with air rebreathers in them. But we're not allowed to, just get really close up to them and try to talk to them or anything. But because there's always that potential that they can break from their containments and then start going on a rampage. So it's more of a safety precaution that they had. But those other guys that are out in the wild or out and about or dealing with these things, 20 feet is, that's definitely, that's true.
Well, you got to think about too, you have wind drift out there. You don't have that in the dumbs. So
Right.
if you have something potentially airborne, wind drift can easily carry that. Now, he did specify that this fungus is very heavy. So it falls to the ground very quickly. So that's why it's not airborne. But that's also why you had to be 20 feet away as opposed to 10 feet. It would make total sense, right? Because
Right.
the spores can be carried further. But he did say they were heavy and they fall to the ground quickly, which is a good thing for us. He talked about and by the way, just to catch up the audience on context, what we're referring to right now is not a zombie specifically that he's referring to in the dumps. He's referring to a giant that they had captured in the dumps that Shawn witnessed in person and was told and trained about. And they specifically called this giant a Nephilim. And the Nephilim is the reference to the Old Testament Nephilim, giants that walked the earth prior to Noah's flood. In fact, Noah's flood was to wipe the giants off the earth. And by the way, I've got 2 guests I've just booked to come on the show next month that are going to be discussing those topics in detail. They're experts in that field. One of them is a big name person who has got movies and books out on the topic, and like several movies and books out on the topic, does conferences, all kinds of stuff, convention centers. So I've booked 2 people that are to come on that are going to talk about that. One I told you about was Rob Skiba, who I wanted to bring on my old channel when I was with Dogman Cams prior to this show, starting my own show. He died just before coming on my show. And he was an expert on the pre-flood days and the giants. And unfortunately, and I also I did an episode on the Antichrist, the identity of the Antichrist. And Rob Skiba came to the exact same conclusion that I did, although he did it a different way with his research. And I honestly think he did a much better job than I do explaining it. But I was blown away by his level of knowledge and the way he explain the topic. He has some of his videos online, and I suggest trying to go look those up. Anything from Rob Skiba. He also goes into a lot of flat Earth stuff. I don't get into the flat Earth stuff; it's just not my cup of tea. Power to those people that do. They're intelligent people. They make good points. I don't take anything away from them, but as far as I'm concerned, you got to pick and choose your battles. And my battle is enough as with giants and zombie apocalypse and that kind of stuff. I don't have time to get into if the Earth is flat around. Doesn't really make a difference to me. It's not changing. I'm worried about us being killed in major apocalypses or eaten by giants or cryptids. So I'm trying to focus on that and warning people. And it's all biblical. The reason I do it, the reason I do the show is twofold. One, it's all biblical prophecy. And so that's my thing. It's theology and biblical prophecy. Number two, it's warning people about real threats and real dangers that can affect you, your family, or our society. All right. That's why I do this show. There are people that are killed and hurt by cryptids. And that's why I don't care if anyone says, oh, that's a crazy topic. That's why I come on here and talk about it. Who gives a voice to these people that have been slaughtered by these creatures? And they're real, and people have been slaughtered by them. And it gets covered up. It gets covered up all the time. Just look up David Pilates, a former retired police officer with the 411 television shows, movies, books, YouTube channel. And look at his 411 of all the people who go missing every year in national parks and rural areas, and it's all covered up by the government. All right. And we're talking hundreds of thousands of people, So there is a point to that. But getting back to the notes. So my buddy said you had to be 20 feet away. So it was a giant that Shawn was referring to. And this giant, Shawn described on its skin, emitted spores. And these spores that were airborne is what carried this so-called zombie virus. And just to go into that again, if somebody got infected by this zombie virus, it would turn them primitive. Like just completely into a primitive creature. They lose all cognitive functionings or reasoning ability. Another characteristic is that their skin becomes super hot, super heated. A lot of times they rip all their clothes off. All right. They become extremely agitated and aggressive, and seem to have a bite drive to where they want to bite or consume flesh. So hence the name, zombie, for lack of a better term. But anyway, and it's fascinating because we just had the TV series of The Last of Us that covered this topic and said it's not a virus, it's a fungus, like a mushroom spore fungus type thing. And it's amazing. I don't believe in coincidence, but it's real coincidental that hit show just came out recently, also based on a video game, consequently. But that we're actually discovering that there might be some actual real sources to back this information up, which is terrifying. But getting back to the notes from my source, he said that they had to stay. Oh, by the way, I keep forgetting this. For the audience, the giant you saw in the dumb, you said he was sitting down, so it was a little hard to determine. But how big would you estimate or guess this giant to be had it been standing up?
Well, I would say probably between, I want to say maybe 15 to 20 feet tall, roughly, because the way he was sitting down is it's a 8 foot wide by about 8 feet or so tall. It is about, I want to say, 10 feet long. His bottom of his feet was up against the end of the box. His knees were bent up, and the way he was sitting, and then his head completely hunched over. So not a 10-foot box. Based on that, I would say anywhere between, 15 to 20 feet.
Right. Okay. So, and that's consistent with other sources. I do have one, aside from this contact source I'm talking about, I did have one other source that I've been speaking to over the years who has told me that he has a source that claimed that he worked in one of these underground domes, and he said that he worked with a giant inside this dome. So, and he's talked about that for years. That's not a new thing. And he didn't tell me that when I went looking for this, although I did ask him. He didn't give me any more information on this, but he did say over the years he's been telling me that he has a source that is works in a dome with a giant as well. And from what I understand, it's 20 feet or more. Yeah, I mean it's big. It's real big. And like Shawn said, that means you're going to be as big wide as well. You know what I mean? If the taller you are. But anyway, getting back to my source on this, he went into a lot of information about the respirator systems and the suits and all that you have to deal with these. I'll swing back to that. He said that the fungus, the spores, are on the surface of the skin of these creatures, and he says that they're creatures, giants that are coming up from underground. All right, like the Nephilim, and again, that's a reference to the Bible. Okay, in Genesis chapter 6, it says that the sons of God found that the daughters of men were attractive. They took wives such as their choosing, and the Nephilim walked on the earth in those days and after. After was on the earth before the flood, and then again after the flood. That's called the second incursion theory. But anyway, so he said they have this thing on the surface of their skin, so you can't go near these things because you can get infected potentially by this. He also said that they found too, or they were briefed that it was in the layers of the skin as well as just on the surface. It wasn't just on the surface; it was actually in portions of their skin. They said that they found, and he likened it to black mold and how black mold spreads. For some reason. Also, he said that it turns them into a primitive state, and it takes over all bodily functions and makes the body heat up all the way, as I just said. He mentioned the Gitmo and Guantanamo. I mentioned that already. He did say, and this is terrifying, all right, he said it does have cross-species contamination, all right? Does. He confirmed it has cross-species contamination. He says it can infect cats. It can infect dogs. He said he was personally called out to a mission in Colorado in the mountains where there was a cougar. There were reports of cat and bear zombies. All right. As crazy as that sounds, he claims that he was called out to Colorado to deal with reports of cat and bear zombies. And he said, yes, they were out there and had to deal with a cougar that was infected with this zombie virus. All right. And so he was on the team that dealt with that. And he said, so it does cross contaminate to multiple species. That's terrifying. I mean, this is all like worse than the Walking Dead kind of stuff. You know what I mean? At least in the Walking Dead, you know, they didn't have like superhuman strength or speed. They were kind of stupid. And if you were smart and didn't get pinned down, you could pretty much manage yourself through these things. Plus, you could use melee weapons to plow through them. And you can't do any of that with these reports. You know what I mean? Plus, animals weren't affected in the Walking Dead, so you didn't have to worry about that as a whole nother issue, right? So this is a whole lot worse than the Walking Dead, I tell you. Now, he said that when he also claimed what I've had a long time theory, because I come from this everyone has their own personal bias and their own opinions. All right. And I'm not saying others are right or wrong or whatever. But mine is I have a bias that I see things through the lens of the Bible, God, and theology. Okay. Because I believe that's the ultimate truth to everything. That doesn't mean everyone has to believe that. That's what I believe. That's what Christians tend to believe. So that said, I've always had a theory that Bigfoots are just leftover remnants of the giants from the Old Testament. They are giants compared to us, and they are cannibals. It fits the two parameters of what the cannibalistic giants were in the Old Testament. And there's stories of Bigfoot, call them whatever name you want, in all over the world. Someone brought up chronic wasting disease. Yes, chronic wasting disease came from the mad cow disease. By the way, mad cow disease was a man-made virus, all right? Man-made, all right? And unintentionally, I believe, but man-made. And then suddenly it got into the wild deer population, especially in the Northwest and around Colorado, and they call it a chronic wasting disease. Now, I lived in Colorado, and I'm a hunter. You can generally tell a creature is not right. It looks mangy. It twitches. It doesn't act right. It doesn't behave like a healthy animal. Another thing is when you kill an animal, what hunters tend to do is you pull out the liver. Look at the liver. If the liver looks clean, then a lot of times the animal's clean. It's the body's filter. If it's all spotted and looks nasty, you don't want to touch that meat. You don't want to eat it. You know what I mean? Don't take the risk. In Colorado, if you kill a deer, you have to send a sample of it into a lab to determine that it's not chronic wasting's disease. But again, how did this man-made thing that's a cousin of mad cow disease get out into the general public? I claim it was done intentionally. All right. When you can't live in the city, what does mankind live off? Bambi. All right. So why not scare people on Bambis, you know? And then you've got another thing. In fact, squirrels in Colorado carry the bubonic Black Death plague. That's something else that they reported on. You don't want to go near a dead squirrel, and that's something else hunters eat too. We eat squirrel here all the time. There are reports that prions in the thing also are the exact same thing from mad cow disease with the spike proteins. So that's another coinker that I won't go into further here. So he said there was cross-species contamination. He said that they had to deal with things in the public. Now, he said one of the things that they did to deal with these things is that they were given different technologies, and one of them was a spray foam, because they could spray foam from a distance, keep their safe distance away, and the spray foam would get all over the creature, and then it hardens, and it basically encases them in to where they can't move. And it starts out soft, but it quickly hardens, and it's a very hard substance to even like a Bigfoot or something massively powerful couldn't couldn't get free of it. And then they could contain this thing, bring it to a dumb. Would be the standard procedure. The standard.
The material that you're talking about, they actually have that available to the public now, where they're actually using this for people who are trying to create their own underground bunkers or their own root cellars or whatever you want to call them. And what it is a layer of insulation foam, and I believe it's some type of epoxy cement mix. And when you spray it on, it sprays on like foam. But then when it hardens up, like you said, and the outside of it's completely hard, it can withstand more weight than your traditional cement can. But it's like 5 times lighter than cement. So just to be able to pick something up with this particular foam, it wouldn't require a whole lot of effort, but it definitely would encase it in there. I've seen bunkers being built that people would have, especially I've seen a lot of them on YouTube now, where they spray it on, and then when it hardens up, so this way they don't actually have to encase it in cement. They could just spray this material, and it's very cost effective. It's very cheap.
Say, it sounds like it'd be a lot cheaper. Cement's so expensive today. Yeah, that's awesome. Do you know the name by any chance?
Well, right offhand, I don't, but I do know that like stores like Menards actually sells them. You know, you see those commercials where they say, "Well, don't put cement into your hole where you put your post in." You get this little bag.
I've seen that.
They're separate, 2 different materials, and you just break it open and you shake it and you cut it open and you pour it in there.
I've seen
and then
that.
It foams up. You'll see it foaming up, and it's
for fence posts or even foundations. I've seen demonstrations of that. That's pretty impressive, because I tell you, I've dug a lot of fence post holes and foundations in my time. So when I saw that, I was like, "Oh, that's awesome!" That makes it easy and cheap, you know. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So he said that they would spray. Now, one thing you got to understand too is people don't have any concept how strong a Bigfoot actually is. It's the strongest thing in the cryptid community that we know of, and it's much stronger than a dog, man. But I think somebody said it would recently. I heard someone say that it would take more than 20 people to try to equal the strength of one Bigfoot.
I was told by the scientists that, well, first of all, there's 7 different classifications of these nebulism giants. But the more wild they are, the more powerful they are, and it's about the strength of 20 silverback gorillas.
Oh, wow.
So one
That's
silverback
insanity.
gorilla, yeah.
Because I can tell you this, my stepfather worked in a planetarium, a primate center. All right. And we would go there. I'd go there all the time, and they had hundreds of different monkeys and all, and they had gorillas and silverbacks. And the silverback, an average chimpanzee, which a lot of people keep as pets, they are 6 times stronger than a human being. And then you got baboons, which are extremely aggressive, and then the gorillas, and the gorillas were at least 10 times the strength of a human being, 10 times the strength. So that stands to reason that, yeah. But they say that the strength of these Bigfoots is insane. They say they can go through anything. That they said that they've seen them rip into steel containers like it was nothing. Like they rip them apart. Like they said, there's nothing you can do to prevent these things from coming in if they really want to come in. I mean, they rip doors off hinges. I mean, they can just get through anything. They're just too strong. And I've seen videos where they've thrown whole trees like it was a baseball. And you're talking about, a multi-ton tree. They've had cases where they've taken heavy tractor equipment. I'm talking the big cat stuff, right? And flipped it over or thrown it, like it was nothing. So yeah, it's scary, the amount of strength. Someone's asking about how tall. Bigfoots tend to be about like 9 to 10 feet tall. However, there are many reports I've heard from people on the inside that said they've encountered Bigfoots that are 14 plus on multiple occasions, 14 plus feet tall. Victor on Jeff Nadalny's show, I think, talked about one that was a 20-foot tall, basically giant. I wouldn't even say Bigfoot at that point. That's a giant. And he said that he had followed this thing over multiple states and was able to finally bring it down. And he said when he brought it down, he laid across its chest. And he said it took this entire length of his body just across this thing's chest. It was that big. It was just massive. Now, the giants, there's a distinction between the Old Testament giants known as the Titans and what's come after the pre-flood and post-flood. All right. The pre-flood giants, I've got accounts in books like this one with Flavius Josephus, who's a 1st century historian that's highly respected. He gave accounts of a skeleton on display in the old city of Jerusalem that was a human that was 100 feet long, the skeleton. They placed it together, like connected all the bones on the ground, and it was in public display in the old city of Jerusalem in the 1st century. And he said it was 100 feet long. The Bible and other sources kind of give accounts of giants that were 300 and 400 feet tall. That would be the Titans. That's the old, like Greek mythology. You have the Clash of the Titans and all that kind of stuff. Then you have the Olympians that came after. Well, after the flood, you still had giants, but they would be in the 20 to 40 foot range max. Not like the 100-foot range or more that were pre-flood. So, and I've heard theologians and scholars say that basically what happened is God changed the earth to where oxygen is different. That's why you see all kinds of species that have basically shrunken down. Your dragonfly now is 6 inches long. Well, it could be 6 feet long in pre-flood times. By the way, when people say prehistoric, I disagree with that. It's pre-flood, not prehistoric. All right. But if you look at things, I mean, a cockroach was 15 to 20 inches long in pre-flood times, and now can be up to about 2 inches long. Alligators, elephants, everything. We have a lot of the same stuff. It's just all a lot smaller now. Even sharks, they're all a lot smaller now. We had sharks in the pre-flood days, but everything's smaller, and that's because God, when he created the flood, he changed the earth and the amount of oxygen on the earth so that things so big could not function or live anymore. So we still have giants. After the flood, you have the accounts of Og, king of Bashan. And later you got the accounts of Og, king of Bashan. They said his bed was made of iron and it was 14 feet long. because that's how big this dude was. Okay. But later accounts, you got David and Goliath, another major giant. And again, it said that his spear, a normal Hapolite spear, was 2.5 pounds, so you can wield it and you can throw it. Well, his was 300 pounds, and he could still wield it and throw it. You know, that tells you how big he was. His sword was over 6 feet long, and you know, weighted. Who knows? I'm sure it was over 100 pounds. So, and there are people that give descriptions of that. But anyway, getting back to this, so to be able to have the spray foam that would encase those things is a big deal, and it sounds like that's what you're referring to. He also talked about he also talked about getting the footage, and I'm not going to go into the detail, but he gave me detail of where he got the footage from and who he got the footage from, and I won't expound on that for his. He asked me to, you know, not reveal him because he is in a NDA, but he told me the exact sources that he got it from, and it was very impressive. He went in to describe the respirator systems that they wore. Now, he said that when they first started dealing with these creatures, they had to wear these face masks and respirators. He says at first it was a joke. It was like something like Mattel would make, like a little toy. But it got more advanced over time as they were called upon to deal with these creatures. And he said that it ended up becoming a quite advanced mask. But he said the mask was huge, and it was very bulky and cumbersome. And it was very difficult for them to be combat effective wearing this bulky, thick stuff. And he went into detail about this. He said that the face shield of the mask was made of Lexan, all right? And he said, and it was very thick and it was very wide, all right? He also said that in later versions of it, they had night vision parts to it. And he also said they ended up giving a pull down face shield. And this pull down face shield that would slide down over it would act as a HUD. And a HUD is like a heads up display. So you could read text messages. You could get communications from your thing. You could see maps. You could see distance, speed. You could act as like a rangefinder, right? GPS coordinates. It's a heads up display, a HUD. This is technology is used a lot in fighter craft, all right, where on the screen, on the windshield, they'll have a digital display of important information. Well, he said that they had this face shield they could pull down to interact with that information or pull it up for a clear, wider view of vision. So that was something else he said. He also said that he described some of the technology of the mask. He said it had a 3-stage. First of all, for people that don't know, if you know, when we had this whole lockdown situation, they were telling everybody, "Oh, the rule is you got to be masked, right?" And that mask is about as effective as this little piece of napkin. It's not. It's absolute crap. Wearing a mask, is stupid. In fact, that mask will make you sick. Because what people don't understand, even the N95s, et cetera, what people don't understand is those masks are for one-time use. They're for temporary use. They're not to be used all the time. All right. So that's an important issue to understand and take note of. They're temporary. Your body is designed to expel bacteria through your respiratory system. Well, if you have something right here that's constantly holding that bacteria in, that's growing and festering, you're going to make yourself sick by keeping a mask on. That's not what they're designed for. All right. So that's ridiculous. Now, another thing is this: most people don't even wear the mask correctly, because when you do wear a mask, you know, you see people all the time, they're like this. Well, guess what? Ineffective. By the way, even this way, ineffective, because you have gaps on the side of your nose, gaps on the bottom, gaps on the side. Guess what? Air is all coming in there. Not effective. All right. You got any facial hair? Well, guess what? Now you got gaps. Ineffective. All right. So, and here's another thing too. Even if you had it securely sealed properly as it should be, all right, your eyes are still open and can get infected. Your ears are open and can get infected. All right. So a mask does nothing. Also, furthermore to that point, the mask is rated to a specific micron to allow material through the airborne material, right? The virus is smaller than the mask. I believe the N95 is rated to a two micron level. Well, the virus is like a one point micron micro or one plus. It's smaller, so it's almost like you have no mask on at all. It's going straight through it. And what the masks were designed for is to block spittle and bacteria, major particles, and especially a lot of airborne particles are through your saliva, and when you speak and when you cough and things like that, or you coming out your nose. That's to block so you're not infecting a patient with those larger particulates. That's what the mask is designed for. It's not designed for an airborne virus. In order to be protected from an airborne virus, you have to have a full hazmat chemical suit, and that suit has to have its own source of oxygen, what they call scuba. So just like scuba diving, where you're carrying your own oxygen tank, all right, which I know because I'm a scuba diver. But you'll see in these high-end facilities, like in the DUMS and Schedule 4 labs, they always plug a hose into their chem suit, all right? It's because they're on independent oxygen, all right? So that's what you need. So they had to create, at first they were carrying tanks in the field, and that wasn't combat effective. You just can't be combat effective when you got this big, giant, heavy tank on your back, right? So they had to come up with a different system. So they created a system. He described this system was very similar to the rebreather. All right. So go ahead.
About this big.
Yeah. So the Navy SEALs and other scuba dive teams in the military have incorporated a thing called a rebreather, and it's a beautiful device that allows them to recirculate their air, and it doesn't give off bubbles in the same degree that like a normal tank does every time you breathe out. And it's a kind of a closed circuit system, if you will. And it's really an impressive, neat system. It's been very effective. It's bulky, but very effective. At least the earlier ones, very bulky. But they designed a system similar to the rebreathers. He says it has a 3-stage filter, and he said it's designed in such a way where it's a closed system, but it is able to burp air one way, so it can release pressure or used up gas in a one-way valve. So it still stays a closed system. He also said that it was a 3-stage system, and he said that they measure the amount of air differently than what we're used to. It's not measured by propane and all that. Even in a scuba thing, you're measuring by pounds or PSI, pounds per square inch. He said these were measured by joules and newtons. Joules and newtons is how they did the measurements on these devices, and it was a 3-stage filter device. Yep. And they said if you had any cuts or wounds, that made you more susceptible even within the 20-foot range. So you're basically out of, if you had any injuries like that were open, that it made you more susceptible to this thing. He said once you got contact with this thing, the stages were just like Shawn had said, because I covered that with him. You would start to get confused like I am right now. You'd start losing short-term memory. Oh, did I just place that there? Where did my drink go? And things like that, to the point that you'll start getting worse and worse. He said then you'll start bleeding out, hemorrhaging out of the eyes, ears, nose, and then even like cerebral fluid start coming out. The eyes will start glazing over. Organs will start shutting down. The heat, there's get a fever, like flu-like symptoms, and the heat takes over. He did say that the brain and the body superheat at this time of the I think he called stage 4 of the infection. And he said by that stage you're gone. I mean, there is, and he also stressed there is no cure that they know of. They were told there is no cure to this thing at all, zero. Um, he said that when they reach the stage 4, he says it looks like someone took a hose and hosed you down with water because your body comes so superheated, everything turns wet and is doused. Like you could wring out your shirt, coat, jeans, jacket kind of thing. And then of course they become primitive and aggressive. So those are the things he said. He also said that the first reporting of this a case of these creatures and this fungus was in Kandahar.
Hmm.
Was the giants coming up in Kandahar out of the mountains? And that's interesting because I'm working on a future show about the Kandahar giant. But anyway, and I hope it ties in. He said Kandahar was the first place that they encountered this for the first time, and he reminded me. He says, "You remember the Moab bomb that we dropped in Kandahar, which is a monster of a bomb. I mean, a monster of a bomb." He said, and I had heard rumors of this before, but I never heard an actual source say this. But he said that was used to push those things back, drive them back into the mountains because they were starting to come out and more of them, and they didn't know how to contain the zombie thing when it was new. So they started bombing the area, and that's what you do. He says the bombs can burn up the spores. So even going back to that video we showed early on in the show, um, if a city, remember when that man was reading and he says, "Oh, if it gets out and affected a city," and he's like, "Oh, Jesus," you remember that?
Hmm.
So yeah, what that is if they feel like it's spread too much in a city, the SOP or protocol is they're going to drop a bomb on that city that superheats everything.
Yep.
Everything.
Sterilize it.
Sterilize, just like they do in the dumps. In the dump, when you go in there, you go in that lab, if there's an outbreak, then and you're on the contamination side and they can't bring you through a detox, they're sterilizing that room, and that means fire. That means everything in there is going to be incinerated.
Yep.
And that's how they contain it, you know. So anyway, that's the majority of what my buddy or my source said. To me when I reached out to my people. I'll try to contact him again later and see if I can possibly get any more information. But I was blown away. You know, it's one thing to hear. Shawn was the first time I've heard this information. I knew about the dumbs, I knew about the giants. I had not heard of the zombie virus, and I just watched The Last of Us, and I was like, that creeps me out. But I had not heard the zombie virus thing. So when my friend contacted me, after I reached out to all my people, I was blown away because he really said that, yeah, I can confirm all that. I've been on teams that dealt with that stuff. He's like, it's frightening, it's scary. He's like, I can't believe that it's out in the public and people are talking about it. He's like, I can't ever talk about it. And but he said he would tell me anything I asked him about for it. And that's I asked him basically what a lot of the stuff that we covered with Shawn, and try to get him to confirm that. And he confirmed that, and he surprised me again that he said he had seen the video, that his own sources, and that he says it's absolutely legitimate, which is absolutely terrifying. So, but anyway, I just wanted to do another show and update people on the update on that point. And Shawn was gracious enough to come in and talk more about it. And I'm glad we got into his books and the security advice he gave out, because that's very important stuff for our time. On my other channel, Braven Bushcraft, Braven, like Braven the Wilds, Bushcraft, I'm going to be doing more shows on home security and things like that. And I'm trying to release my other video on the pocket dump. So if I can do that today, I'll try to do that. But and not have it taken down again. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and call it there. And I don't know what the time is on this thing. There's new rules on the time limits, and so I don't want to get in trouble with that again. Last time I got in trouble because we went over 2 hours, and right now we're at 2:59. So, but Shawn, thank you so much for coming on. People, I've got links to his consultant business and to his information, and that's going to be below. So check those out. if you want to reach him, contact him there. You can reach out to me. I'll try to do the same. And if you have any stories, if you have any information and no one knows somebody that knows a guy who knew a guy that saw Ferris Bueller pass out of 31 flavors, hit me up, especially if it's about the zombie stuff, or if it's about giants or cryptids or other crazy paranormal stuff, then please let me know. Hit me up at, you can hit me up at the HarbingerReport at yahoo.com. It's HarbingerReport at yahoo.com. On my Bushcraft channel, it's going to be Braven Bushcraft at yahoo.com. Braven Bushcraft at yahoo.com. Please like and support the channel. Please subscribe. If you liked it, pass it on to your friends. That helps out a lot, especially if the show's new and trying to grow. Thank you, everybody. Shawn, you have anything you want to say?
Well, just just always be aware of your surroundings. If you see any changes in nature or anything that looks out of place, use your survival acronyms. Take a look at your situation. Look at what changes there are. It's a good idea to have your preps in place, your bug out bags if you need it, if you have to evacuate the areas. Just use your common sense,
Right. Yeah, well, common sense is not so common anymore. But yeah, look, people, common sense, absolutely. And, I'll say from my own personal testimony, the solution to all this stuff is God. And we are not, this stuff is frightening, but we are not called to live by fear, anxiety, or worry. We're called to live by faith, hope, and trust in the Lord. And that's made perfect in love for God and each other. And in our world today, where everything's trying to divide us and separate us, we need to find unity with each other. And I pray that we can find that again in our identity as a country and country men and women, and pull together for the sake of our families, our children, and our society. And always count on God, no matter what, no matter how bad things look. This life is temporary and it's a test. Eternity is our goal, and that is forever. So, and it's almost like a woman having birth with a child. She goes through enormous pain, but once she has that child in her arms, all that pain goes away instantly, and all she sees is the love of that child and that connection. It's kind of like that. This world can be a painful place for a lot of people. A lot of people are suffering. A lot of people have depression or lost loved ones. I know I've lost plenty of loved ones, and it's hard. Holidays are hard now when I don't have my family anymore with me. It's very tough. And I just try and turn that time to spend with the Lord, because our only goal in this life is to get to eternity with the Lord and our loved ones. And that's a human being, and you lose out on the test of what it is to be in this world. So the devil and darkness, and we're born into a world of war. Since that's called the church militant we live in. Since the time since the earth and humanity was created, all the way to the now, we're in a constant fight between the war of good and evil. Pick a side. Let the bad be bad. Let the good be good. God spits the lukewarm out of his mouth. Choose a side, but choose a side. Try to better your lives for yourself and for your children, for your soul, and for your future. It's the best advice I can give. If we don't do that, we failed as human beings, and we failed in the test of life. But let's not do that. Let's try to support each other and support trying to get into heaven with each other and get past all this bad darkness here and get on to better things. There is one of the things I love in Lord of the Rings, when Gandalf and the little hobbit dude are getting ready on the other side. You know what I mean? Like, and then you see the little smile on the hobbit because he's got hope. Time and Eddie, God bless. Be safe.
Thanks for having me, John.